So if we are looking to use all of these elements of the deadly triad, or we're not willing to forego any of those, can we somehow concentrate on improving learning stability in other ways? So, as we just discussed, the merits of off-policy bootstrapping with function approximation, so the benefits of this deadly triad, often outweigh the danger of instability and divergence. So for such methods, for methods that do include all of these, we try to mainly focus on avoiding the instability and divergence, to add some tricks and approaches that helps with the learning stability. Remember, so let's discuss all of these, but you should remember that for our approximation, we update our approximation function through interactions with the environment. So that's our samples that we use to train it. Right? We sample transitions, the state, action, reward, and next states. We estimate the state or action value for S, for the state or state action that we just visited, and then we update the approximation function towards the new estimation, the small gradient step. Stochastic gradient descent is based on sample TD error in the approximated value, right? So this is the semi-gradient solution for updating a function approximator, specifically a state value approximator. We would like to stop at a fixed point, that is, whenever our function approximator is accurate enough to provide us with the expected state value, the expected value that is the state value for a given state. Right? What can go wrong when we do these updates? Well, we can have bias in the sampled value, right? If this is our sampled value, we might have, this is our sampled value, we might have bias in this sampled value. And also we might have high variance of sampled values. These two might lead to some either wrong learning divergence or unstable learning. How do we define bias in the state values? It's when the expected sampled state value is not the true state value. Okay, what's the problem with bias? Mainly that we're learning or we're training our function approximator towards the wrong value, right? What's the problem with high variance in the sampled state values? Well, that might lead us to noisy gradients, or that might push us in the wrong direction, right? So very noisy updates to our function approximators that might be so noisy that can lead to learning divergence. Okay, so let's look at the following samples. And one of these samples, the sample of the state value, is based on TD0, right? Which is the sample value is simply the immediate reward, plus the approximated value of the next state that we arrive at. And at the bottom, this is an example of a sample state value based on a Monte Carlo sampling. That is, we sample a full trajectory and take the sum of the observed reward, or discounted observed reward if we have a discount factor. Which of these introduced higher bias and which higher variance? Which has the higher bias?
TD learning.
TD learning. Actually, yeah, that's the only. So the Monte Carlo one doesn't have bias, right? This one doesn't have bias because we're sampling from the real world, from the real process, while this estimation, this sample, has bias that is introduced by the approximation in our next state. If this approximation is wrong, then we introduce some bias into the sample, the state sample. And which has higher variance, so obviously the Monte Carlo approach has very high variance, specifically in a highly stochastic environment. Right, so we see, and we saw that before, that TD0 adds bias to the sampled state value. Also, this, by the way, the same claims are true for Q values. Okay, so I'm just explaining everything on state values just for convenience, but this is also correct for Q values. So this bias stems from the error of the approximation function at the next state. Monte Carlo, however, does not suffer from bias, right? The sum of reward is sampled from the real process, but it usually suffers from high variance due to the high variance in the sample trajectory, specifically in noisy environments. So where were we? Okay, so can we rely on future reward, right, with reduced bias, such as in the Monte Carlo approach, while weighing them according to their probability? So you see, I'm trying to have the best of both. So I would like to look at all of the rewards in a trajectory and take them into account to reduce bias. But also, I would like to incorporate the fact that the rewards that I see at the first few steps have higher probability. I'm more certain about them. But those that I see 100 steps from now, we'll take them into account, but with a lesser weight, right? And that makes sense because far future rewards are less likely, and as a result, we should rely less on them in order to reduce our variance. However, we would like to include all of them in order to reduce bias. So this leads me to some enhancements in n-step bootstrapping. So in n-step bootstrapping, we say, no, all of them are weighted the same. The first reward that we see has the same probability or the same weight as the one that I see n steps into the future, and then I don't consider any reward that I see after that. But we can do it in a more structured way. We can actually consider all of the reward in a trajectory in a diminishing factor, right? This is exactly what we do in eligibility traces, and we'll cover that in the next lecture.